3, 2, 1.
All right.
Oh, okay. We can do this, can't we, Tim?
Well, we can try.
We can try. Where's David? David, we miss you. We're nothing without you.
We're out of control without you, more likely.
Absolutely. You were a bit loose. You didn't give the government leave on Thursday.
Yes. I'm sure if David had been there, he would have slapped me on the hand for it. The government was trying to kick Kashalia, their former MP, off the committee and replace her with one of their own. And I didn't give them leave. It probably will still happen next week, or next sitting week. But I think there just needs to be a bigger discussion amongst the crossbench about it and make sure everyone's on board with it. So.
And I also think, Tim, I mean, it's only fair that she's actually there when they have those conversations, and we can all have those conversations together. And I think you made a really fair point that the proportionality aspect of it, being that now the crossbench is much bigger than the opposition and almost as big as the government in the upper house.
And the government's down to 16 MPs and the crossbench has got 13.
Yeah, 3 independents.
Yeah. Because obviously Adam and Kashalia.
Yeah, they've joined our independent team.
Anyway, we're here, Tim and Catherine doing the Tim and David show this morning. Because David's been a close contact for a COVID case and has to isolate. So David missed Wednesday and Thursday this week in Parliament, and I was left all alone to cause havoc.
And for myself, the last conversation that I had with David on Thursday night was when we were really busy. Tuesday night was when you had said that you wanted to have dinner, and then the government denied us leave to do that. So then we worked through, and David and I were talking about all the different ways we could cook and garlic, and I said I had a box of garlic and I was going to give him some garlic, and then he just didn't come back. So David, if you actually came and got the garlic, you would have been much better.
Luckily we're leaving the garlic in your office, so it'll smell of garlic by the time you're back here. We're in David's office, by the way, because he had the lights and the camera stand is set up in here.
As well as with us, just so that we can feel David's presence, as well as he's a bit mofo because he actually watched the whole Parliament live from home, as well as continued to work, as I could tell by Tim being pestered by the phone all the time. So he didn't stop working, good old David.
Watching it all from home. So we've often talked about having Catherine in a video with us, but David always gets cold feet because he's worried that she's a loose cannon that's going to say something out of turn. So, but David's not here, so here we are.
See, Tim's the rebel, man. Tim's the rebel. And when David actually goes to federal parliament, it'll be the Tim and Catherine show until David's replacement comes up. Our bench is obviously the naughty chair in parliament. It is a little bit. And it was an interesting week. For myself, on the Monday, I went to Kimberly's funeral just across the road here at St. Pat's. Which was a very sombre affair. Obviously the bullying, and last week obviously we had the conversation about Kashala being bullied. Then this week I got to watch the mean men piling on the opposition. It just doesn't stop within Parliament, that they can't treat the place as a professional environment, that they have to get all nasty and personal. But let's not talk about nasty members of Parliament because we'd be here all day, Tim. Let's just talk about the nice ones that you have in front. What did we do? Tuesday was the animal, wasn't it? I think that was the bit of the highlight of the day.
The government had animal welfare legislation.
Yep.
To make it slightly more difficult and have slightly higher penalties for animal activists who break onto farms. So that bill took up a lot of time. Everyone wanted to talk on it.
Yeah.
The government's introduced a slightly better scheme. If you put all the red tape in place as a farmer, the police will be able to hand out on-the-spot fines to protesters. So on the balance, it was better than what we had before, though it may not have been the best possible solution.
Yeah, and it all came about obviously from the animal activism in 2018, 2019. So we spoke a bit about goats.
Yes.
We did.
We had the Economy and Infrastructure Committee did an inquiry in 2019 into it, and came up with the recommendations, which the government sort of half followed in this legislation. So that happened. Anyway, we support it.
But I don't know about your debate. So I listened to your debate, but my debate was obviously around, I'm fully supportive that people who actually go onto farms, the animal activists, I'm obviously supportive of protesters, but some of the comeback from the inquiry was just how traumatised the farmers were and their families when activists come into their home to do these things. So there is a way to protest and protest safely, but within my debate I obviously brought up the point that it has been very clear from this government as well as the Animal Justice Party that they're all keen to talk about little goats and sheep and cows, but they're not interested in talking about laboratory animals, such as the ones that you use for medical scientific research. So I have not heard a peep out of this government or the Animal Justice Party about the monkeys, the little rabbits, the mice, the rats, all the animals that are used in laboratories for vaccine manufacturing. But we can talk about goats and sheep.
Yeah. All right, and we can see Catherine talks even more than David does.
So,
What I did want to say was this week, or actually last week, was the 2-year anniversary of the state of emergency.
Yeah.
And I gave I talked about a couple of times how the government needs to end all the things the government's done to us in 2 years, and how apparently they still think there's an emergency when the pandemic's over for most people, but they're still locking the unvaccinated out, which is just wrong. And a few things I talked about this week was highlighting how the mandates are still crucifying part of the population and shouldn't be happening.
and that was one of the last conversations I did have with David, because I get a lot on my Facebook as well, what's going on with David's motion around mandates, how's that progressing. And David's last words to me was that he wanted to approach the government at the end of this week, either via a letter or just a good old prod, because we've heard absolute crickets. I think you guys, like Dave and Tim and myself, nearly every week and every day that we sit in Parliament, we have brought up the mandates in some way, shape or form, from constituency questions to adjournments to notices of motion, and questions without notice, just begging for the mandates to end and just showing the absolute ludicrous of it.
And the cruelty
And the nastiness. And I mean, I don't know, I think I sent it to you. I had a lot of the government all dressed up last night, the lower house, not us, because we were working, leaving Parliament. And I inquired and they were all going to Hamilton, and I thought it was some posh place. I didn't realise that they were going to a show. And then I saw the Premier and his wife wearing a mask with the show's name on it. And it's that virtual signalling that I have said from the start, those masks. He's not wearing an N95 mask. He's wearing a piece of advertisement on his face. He's got circle, front row circle tickets. They're nice and pricey, just letting you know. And a lot from his other ministers all went. So, yeah. But all the rest of the small businesses in my area continue to struggle. I don't know about you, Tim, but I'm just watching them go down like flies, even though that they apparently, we're COVID normal, can't get staff, can't operate at full capacity. No one's coming out due to the vast majority of left Victoria. And yeah, it's the dynamics in the area have changed. I don't know, do you even go to High Point? Have you ever been?
Where's High Point?
Oh, there we go.
I'm a country boy.
A country boy. So High Point, so in Melbourne you've got Big Chadstone on the eastern suburbs and you've got High Point in the west. Now High Point was made like 40 plus years ago when I was a little girl. There was Myer and Target and it was a big quarry, and then they built High Point in like the shopping centre in between. So it's like multi-level in a quarry. Target's closed at High Point. Now, what seemed to have happened, and I'll just give you a little thing. In High Point, the high end, so Chadstone always had high end, like Chanel and Gucci or whatever it is, yeah. So in Chadstone or the eastern suburbs, you can get yourself a little Gucci bag. Not in High Point. High Point, we got the Gucci bags in about 5 years ago. Guess who survived? All the high end shops and all the lower end, like Target, did not survive. That is, and I can walk through High Point and there's empty shops absolutely everywhere. Good luck. Makes Melbourne CBD, because a shopping centre is pretty much something like Melbourne CBD with a roof on it, but you can walk through, all climate changed or controlled. Change, whoops, slip of the tongue. But yeah, that was just, for me, just heartbreaking. And that's big business, yeah.
That's the same all over the state.
It's
there
just
are empty
ridiculous.
shops everywhere.
Devastating for all those small business owners. Just devastating. Okay, but let's go in the bills. Let's just talk about the bills. I do go off track, don't I? So obviously we did livestock, animal activism. Then we did the Justice Legislation Amendment, trial by judge alone, and other matters.
That was just extending some of the COVID measures that they used to keep the courts running during COVID. For whatever reason, they thought they'd keep going. Some of the things made things run more smoothly. Hopefully, there were not too many abuses of justice in the process.
And part of my debate, I brought up the point that the pandemic's over to a point. So why do we need this? And then the other element was that they sneakily put in an amendment to continue this on for another 12 months under the, I'm just trying to think of the other act that they attached that to. Even the Green was surprised when I brought it up. She said, I thought they were going to do a House amendment, but they actually put it in as a clause 10. But the other element to that I brought up in Parliament, that if you want to reduce the backlog, drop the COVID fines, the stupid mask fine, the stupid fines that you've given to businesses and churches. It made them all kind of squirm in their seat. But
one thing David brought up on Tuesday was the fines standing at bus stops and train stations on the platform. If you're not wearing a mask,
still there,
you can be fined. No one knows that people know you have to wear the mask on the public transport itself, but the whopping big fines is $3,500 if you're standing on the platform without a mask on, or at the tram stop,
and Tim,
or the bus stop
outside. Isn't that bloody stupid? And I've actually seen them since David brought it up a couple of weeks ago, but that he found that they've put core flutes at bus stops and tram stops, and people are standing there in the heat with no one around, in their stupid, in the nappies that don't work on their face. It's just, when are they just going to let it go? When are they going to let the mask element go and allow people to make their own choices if they want to wear a mask, if they don't want to wear a mask? The fines, just ridiculous. I can't. During the pandemic bill, Tim, I brought up the point that you and I were both on council. When health officers go into a shop and someone gets poisoned, there has to be proof that someone got actually ill from that. This is just all fanciful, absolutely fanciful on how you could actually find someone and you can't see the cause and effect. So it's...
Anyway.
That's me off my track again. Go on. You just keep being the sensible one here, Tim.
So we're not monitoring this feed, by the way. Hopefully it's actually playing and we're not just talking to an empty camera.
We possibly could be.
If you're asking questions, we're not seeing them, so don't expect responses to questions.
Not till later.
So Forest Amendment Bill,
Yep.
Forest Conservation Bill, it was supposedly, it gave the minister a bunch of powers to make it slightly harder for third-party groups to sue the big forest and timber industry when they're logging. It was a poor solution by government that's more supporters of the activists than they are the loggers. But maybe it'll make it a little bit harder to sue them because the big forests and the loggers are tied up in dozens of these vexatious lawsuits about how they're logging, and it's shutting down the factories, shutting down workers. Timber, you might have a different idea, but in my opinion, timber is a sustainable resource. It's a good thing to grow trees and cut them down and grow them again. We should have more of it rather than less. Mismanagement of the forest is what kills the animals.
Amen.
Not logging. It's mismanagement by national parks, by DELP. Anyway.
Correct. No, Tim, you're absolutely right. When I came into Parliament, I would have been someone who would have felt, it sounds very good on pen and paper, you've got to save the forest and all that, but it would seem that from their tracking, our tree canopy has actually grown, and the vast majority of when trees go is because of bushfires, and that's because DELP it's mismanaging. That's my city girl talk compared to the country. It's like city mouse, country mouse.
When you have a big fires like we had in 2020, it kills off vast swathes of trees, kills billions of animals. In the areas that are logged and managed, the fires don't get out of control.
No.
And it's just the locking up the parks and letting it go wild, which causes the holocausts.
Yep.
Anyway, so we supported that legislation. I don't know if it'll make things much better, but hopefully it'll make it a bit better for loggers.
Yeah, and Tim, that wasn't dissimilar to the Livestock Management Amendment, which is the animal activism bill, but such as a city girl like me, that understanding what the farmers were actually going through, what regional Victoria goes through when you get silly city folk trying to step on their toes, being that the farmers look after their animals, they have to, they need to, so it's screamingly rude to act like they don't, and then when it comes to timber, trees grow all the time. Yep. So it was a great week for regional Victoria in my mind.
That sounds like a chance for me to plug Rexit, the idea of separating regional Victoria from the city. So as we all know, there's 3 voters in the city for every one in the regional areas, and this Melbourne government, I keep calling this Melbourne government, keep pushing solutions that sound good in the city, that shut down the rural economy and doesn't actually provide any benefits, environmental benefits or anything else. It just sounds good to city voters. And the regional areas are disposable. Expendable.
And for me, Tim, obviously from living in Western Metro, I've many times over the years with our council connections gone around Victoria. For myself, Western Metropolitan Region gets the same kind of raw deal as regional Victoria does. We are very safe labour. They throw money towards all the marginal seats, and their heartland, the red land of the West, we don't get that kind of money. So we would get $5 million for a project or something, where they would get 50, and then our state of our roads, the state of our infrastructure in the western suburbs is on par with some of the worst parts of regional Victoria, but they ignore. So it's pretty sad. But do you want to talk about other matters that happened within the House this week, or do you want to talk about what's coming up next week?
Either's fine. What else happened in the House this week?
I don't know. Some of the things that we brought up individually was I brought up, we had reports, and I brought up around the child sex offender information that the government actually has not and continues to give lip service to the report's recommendations. So for myself, I'm going to continue on putting pressure that the government actually does something about the child sex offender role. The Libs on Wednesday. So non-government business on Wednesday was a bit of fun, as it always is. We had David, the Libs brought up, I don't think they got to that one, did they? But they did bring up the wait times for ambulance services.
And the phone calls, Esther.
Yep, not being answered.
Which is I don't think the Libs are not pretty good at prosecuting that argument, but there is a definite issue there. And particularly when they sacked a whole bunch of Esther workers because they weren't vaccinated and then wondered why the next day the phones
Getting answered.
were 15-minute waits to get on the call and people were dying.
Yeah.
But for your health, it's all for your health.
Yeah, so, and that was those two. And who else had one? Oh, the Greens. The Greens put up their homelessness little bitty bill, which...
Once again, I missed out on speaking on.
Me too. It just happens like last week too. You and I sometimes, whoops, haven't got enough time for you two to talk.
Greens said housing is a right. They're trying to, but it's not a right. You haven't got a right to demand a house from somebody else. You've got a right. It's a house. Only rights you have are negative rights. The rights to stop the government doing something to you.
Yeah, and I think the opposition were pretty good this week to actually bring up the point how the Premier believes that it's okay not to be able to afford a home. It's going to be the new norm, where they brought in the new Mr. Taxman here, all the things around the increased taxes that this government are looking for. So because they've pretty much, we came into this parliament with this government broke. They've used the pandemic to throw us even to further debt. They're continually looking for innovative ways to fine us, if not to tax us, if not to give us another levy. And some of them are absolutely outrageous. I mean, they're going to continue to rob Peter to pay Paul. This government is... It's my favourite one. And what else, Tim? So that was Wednesday. Appalling behaviour by the government on Thursday. Appalling behaviour every time in question time.
And they never answer our questions.
Oh.
We should anyway. And Catherine had.
So yeah, that was my.
How many outstanding questions do you have, Catherine?
I have. I think I have. Just by because like I had to make the point, because you can only, when you raise a question, it can only be to one minister. So I just decided just to point out the health minister's non-response to my constituency questions and non-response to my adjournments. Not to say that we get the list of everyone's, your ones, every member of parliament what are outstanding, and I came up with almost a whopping. I've got about 100 from, and they're dating back from May. And here is the government off the floor going, "Oh, he's so busy." Really, too busy. It's when I'm in Parliament. You're with a question without notice. You've got a day or two to answer. A constituency question, you have 14 days. An adjournment, 30 days. I have hundreds that they have not answered. So in other words, this government and their ministers absolutely stick their finger up at the process of this parliament, like total disrespect.
When you get a response back, it's 2 or 3 lines generally saying, "No, we don't care."
Yeah. But they're non-responding. Yeah. Just non-responding. In other words, we do not have to answer your questions, even when you raise them in Parliament, even on behalf of your constituents, even on behalf of your area. So it is quite outrageous. I think the outrageousness of this government, and I've been told that this kind of arrogance that we're seeing from the Daniel Andrews government is something that we have not seen in our lifetime. If not, this Parliament hasn't never seen something like this in their lifetime, in the way of just normal government practices, as in normal democratic processes of we will respect procedure to answer questions, we respect the Parliament, we respect members of Parliament to answer questions and constituents. Not this government.
Why it's dangerous giving them emergency powers. But anyway, we should stop rambling on.
I don't think it's rambling, Tim.
The 7 people who are still listening.
You are so
just
cute.
Wanted to mention, so I talked about lifting the vaccine mandate. If they can't lift them altogether, they should lift them on libraries and they should lift them on pools. I asked them to justify why primary school kids are still wearing masks. There's a few of them. There's no science behind it. What else? Anyway, we talked on a bunch of stuff as usual, and government probably will ignore the bulk of it.
Yep, and I brought up that from research, obviously, that the Pfizer vaccine on children actually only lasts for 30 days. Why they keep continuing to put masks on children when we know scientific research, that it is a 30-day effectiveness on kids. So, let's see how they non-answer all those questions again. Continue on begging them to lift the mandates for people to actually go back to work. And if they don't realise, I think it's going to have to come down to one of them not having the ambulance answered, not being able to, when they go get care. It's just, anyway.
Yeah.
That's just me. Friday frustrations.
All right. And this is, you see what happens when David's not here. We ramble on.
And we also don't know how to turn it off too. We don't know how to turn it off.
I'm going to jump up and wander around the back.
Well, thank you, Tim. David, your office will be kept as normally messy as it is. Busy messy. We thank you all for, and thank you, Tim, for actually doing this. And David, it wasn't that bad, was it? Seriously, David. Was this bad?
David's going to think it was bad.
David's going to be going, stick to script, be on professional. No, let's have some fun.
Right.
Thank you and see you.
I think we've been on the side the whole time.
Bye. What, you had it not on?
I think it's been
okay.
Sideways.
And did you stopped it and posted it?
And it probably didn't even have me in it.
What?
It probably showed this.
Are you kidding me?
I know, it probably did have me, but we've been like this the whole time.
Are you kidding me? Let's see it.
Perhaps not. Perhaps it's fine.
We're still live, I think.
Are we?
You're ever going to finish it?
How do you stop it then? Hit finish.
You're hilarious.